Constitution and therefore naturally must be removed. It's in that context that the first point of resolution is that that motion was scheduled initially for the 22nd of February this year. The collective of leaders of opposition parties that are here feel that it is urgent and therefore naturally Parliament must convene urgently. The Economic Freedom Fighters, as we consulted previously, have written to the Speaker of the National Assembly to request that there be an urgent sitting. That sitting must take place during this week. We can't sit and wait for the ANC's continued deliberations that go nowhere. It's along with that we are calling all South Africans to say on the day of that march, South Africans must, from all walks of life, from civil society, from religious fraternity, from professional bodies, business, labor, political formations, must march in their numbers to insist that Jacob Zuma must be removed as a matter of urgency. We are also requesting that the Programming Committee of Parliament meet urgently so that we can schedule it appropriately as to when the sitting of that particular sitting, so that we can vote on the removal of Jacob Zuma. In the light of that, as per the Constitutional Court judgment that found that President Jacob Zuma had violated Section 89B of the Constitution, we hold the absolute view that that same judgment, as tabled by Chief Justice Mogoeng, extended further to say that Parliament had failed in its duty. This has also applied in the December judgment that has come on board. Therefore, it is the view, if you then want to uphold the Constitution of South Africa, it is the view of the collective that is here of leaders that we need to move straight ahead to apply Section 50 of the Constitution, which says, noting that Parliament has been found against in this judgment, that we must proceed to the dissolution of Parliament. We say that on the basis of saying it cannot be that we enter factional battles and seek to propose that we must support Cyril Ramaphosa or anybody from the ANC. It is the view of the collective that the ANC has been complicit in violating the Constitution, in defending criminality, and therefore to request of South Africans to then sit back and insist that another person must come in from the ANC would be to undermine constitutionalism, and therefore we want to resort to Section 50 of the Constitution, which calls for a dissolution of Parliament, and ultimately that anybody who wants to lead the ANC or wants to lead Parliament or lead the people of South Africa must have a mandate from the people of South Africa. And therefore it goes naturally to say that subsequent to that we would then move on to an early election so that we can contest elections and ultimately give them a fresh mandate to a sixth Parliament. So the only talks of a transition, CIC, should be a transition from the fifth Parliament to the sixth Parliament. Let me, in closing, reiterate the call of the leaders here, which is to state that where, in fact, the centenary celebrations of Nelson Mandela, we honor Nelson Mandela, but we believe that, in fact, no state resources must be used to sponsor an election campaign by the ANC. We have seen historically what they did at the funeral of Nelson Mandela. We are not going to permit or allow them to do likewise in this centenary campaign and ultimately abuse state resources in sponsoring a campaign for whoever the faction of the ANC is. With those remarks, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take that was held here today and say that we will have continuous engagement going forward as opposition parties. We can then take questions. Thank you, SG.
Thank you very much. May we check if there are questions from the members of the media? Yes, I have answered this side. I see one hand here. Any other hand? The second hand there. All right, no, thank you. We'll take that. If there's any other hand, you take it there after. You shall say your name and the media house you represent. We'll start with you, and then the second from SABC. Yes.
Thanks, Gay Davis from Eyewitness News. Mr. Mamoni, if you can just go over the scenario that you see playing out in terms of the dissolution of Parliament, my understanding is if the President cannot be elected within the 30-day period, assuming that there's a resignation, then the acting President has to dissolve Parliament. And is that the scenario in which you see this unfolding? If you could just elaborate in that sense.
You can. Should we take a few and then go?
No, yeah, we'll take the second hand here.
Ulelani from SABC. I see that you are adopting a two-pronged approach, which in other words, on one hand you want the parliament to be dissolved, but on the other hand you want a motion of no confidence to be held urgently. Which one actually is it that you...
No, let me take one. Is there another one or is that the only two?
These were the only two hands that we saw, at least for now. Yes, Anika.
Thank you so much. Anika Rasi, has there been any formal response from the Speaker of the National Assembly with regards to the request for a special sitting tomorrow? Please, thank you.
On the first, and I think I must answer the question that Bulalani raises first. Bulalani, it's not a two-pronged approach. It's to say everybody in South Africa has called for the removal of Zuma.
All right, as it is in live television, we've just lost visual contact there. That was the opposition parties briefing the media after their meeting, of course, about the imminent recall of President Jacob Zuma. Let's go back live to Parliament and see what they're saying.
Moved. There is a playing out that says, A, if it's in a Section 102 motion, the cabinet, which includes the deputy president, must then resign subsequent to that. And we hold a view that the acting president at that time must have the sole duty of then saying whether it be we must dissolve parliament and in fact go to early elections. Because you can't then say with all the people who were there in parliament who violated their oaths of office, as the majority of the parliament has done and has been found against by the speaker, that we must proceed and say amongst that majority we must just simply elect a new president. So our position is to say there will be a removal of the president, but then what happens subsequent to that can't just be simply saying you apply the process where you say amongst the members who are remaining we must just pick one. Otherwise we run the risk of being factional. I think I don't know if you want to add.
No, this thing is very simple. First thing first, motion of no confidence must take place this week, and Balaga has not responded to the EFF letter about bringing forward the motion of no confidence. And by tomorrow, 10 o'clock, if Balaga has not responded, the EFF is going to launch an agent application in court, because we are in a crisis as it is now as a country. Then, because we are going to succeed as all parties to remove Zuma through a motion of no confidence, we are confident about that. We will also dissolve ourselves. Once we remove Zuma, Parliament must be dissolved, because the Constitutional Court made a ruling that Parliament failed to discharge its responsibility when it couldn't protect the public protector, including holding the president accountable. That was the first time, and the second time was now on the impeachment, that we did not do what was expected of Parliament to hold the president through the processes of impeachment. So on a number of occasions, even though we as opposition parties have taken a stand, a very strong positions against Zuma and how Parliament must conduct itself, we were defeated. And therefore we are part of the Parliament which has been taking wrong decisions throughout. And therefore our stay in Parliament will mean we are inconsistent and we cannot be relied on. Because if there is a ruling against Zuma, we say no, the court has ruled against Zuma, he must go. What about us as parliamentarians? Because there is a ruling against us by a court. We must be consistent like that. So that's what is going to happen. It doesn't mean that it's a two-pronged approach. It's one approach. It follows each other like that. What we are saying is that we are not part of ANC factional battles. We are not for Cyril. We don't want Cyril to be president. Cyril is like Zuma, they are the same. Cyril was part of the people who defended Zuma's wrongdoing and helped him to violate the constitution. So when you say Zuma must go and fold your arms, you are unwittingly saying Cyril Ramaphosa must come in. And we cannot be part of that. We are not part of that. The problem is not Zuma. The problem is not Cyril. The problem is the ANC. So the ANC must be voted out. And the people of South Africa are now given an opportunity to choose properly this time around. That is the only way we can get our people involved to resolve this crisis we're confronted with as a country. We don't want some elitist arrangement where we sit as a group of elite and say from the opposition side we'll field this candidate, and then the other elite from the ANC side says we'll field this candidate without the involvement of the masses. The only way masses can be involved democratically and peacefully is through an election process. And let's do exactly that. That's where we come from. To think that when Zuma leaves, our problems are going to disappear, that is being disingenuous. And we're not being realistic. When the ANC leaves, our problems will disappear because our problems are carried by the ANC. The last point I want to make is, why is the ANC not telling us the reason why they want Zuma to go? People just wake up one morning and they are all saying we're in a discussion, Zuma must go, Zuma must go. And then no one asks them a question, why should Zuma go? You know the reasons of the opposition why Zuma must go. The ANC says Zuma must go for factional reasons. That's why you see Derek Anakom dancing the way he's dancing now. He's happy that it's their time to eat. That's why all of a sudden Derek has found a tune. He can dance because it's their time to eat. It's a factional reason why they want Zuma to go. And they are hijacking our genuine program to demand Zuma to go because that is getting rid of corruption. But they've never uttered that from their mouth. Why are they not saying from the ANC side, we want Zuma to go because he's corrupt? Because the court found him that he has violated his oath of office. They've never said that. Because they agree with everything else Zuma stands for. They want to continue with the same things when they take power. They want Zuma to go because it's the time for Cyril's group to eat. And they call it a transition. Transition from what? It can't be a transition. It's not a transition. That is an abuse of concepts. It's factions changing, swapping seats. Instead of transition, we must call it swapping. It's not a transition, it's a swapping. From one corrupt fellow to another corrupt fellow. Transition means completely different thing. There is no transition taking place in South Africa. Factions are swapping. It's their time to eat. That's why Ubona because already. So they are dancing for their food because it's their time to eat.
General?
No comment.
But I just react to the question that Davis asked. You're referring to section 86(1). If the president cannot be elected, then after 30 days there should be a dissolvement of parliament. That's not what we're referring to. We are referring to section 51 of the Constitution. And that's a decision by the House taken by a resolution with a simple majority to dissolve the House after 3 years have passed. And we've already been past the 3 years. So it's a question of the motion of no confidence in the President, and then afterwards a resolution to dissolve the House.
Thank you. Comrade Mbinda, we're moving like this in closing.
No, there are NZSG behind you.
Oh. Hi, Joseph. Musi.
Joseph Musi, SABC. Just a few questions. The first one is, we know that the ANC is having an NEC today, and it's speculated that they might call on the President they might recall the President. Would the EFF be willing, if asked by the ANC, to defer your own motion of no confidence and allow them to then call their own, or what's the position on that if they were to ask you? And secondly, the idea of Parliament being dissolved is not new. We know that the DA had called for such in the past when they had the previous vote of no confidence motion, and the EFF was actually quite opposed to that, if I remember well. What has changed your minds about it?
When are you
I'm a visit. No, the EFF never opposed the dissolution of Parliament. What we said to Musi is that we were together yesterday, and then the following day you called for a dissolution of Parliament without talking to us. We are colleagues, we must talk to each other and take each other into confidence. And that's what exactly happened now. We have spoken to each other and we found each other. And if you remember, the DA was even saying at the time, but you spoke about dissolution of Parliament even before us. We had made this point earlier about possible dissolution of Parliament after exhausting every option available to us. We said the dissolution of Parliament will be the last resort. So that's what we are doing. So we've been consistent about the whole thing. There's no ANC which is going to get any motion of no confidence from the EFF. It's our motion. And the motions of no confidence are governed by rules of Parliament. So they are either going to work through the motion of no confidence of the EFF, or they will have to wait for another year. And if they wait for another year, it means that they must come and defend Zuma in the motion of no confidence of the EFF. They are in a difficult situation. We really don't care what the ANC is discussing in Nazareth. In what do you call it?
In the bush.
In the bush. We don't care whether they are drinking or they are drunk or whatever they are doing. We are really not interested. Because the ANC is not a solution. What the ANC doesn't inform what we are doing. We are doing our own thing. The problem is not Zuma. The problem is not Ramaphosa. The problem is the ANC. So why would we be excited about, hey, the NEC is meeting? What NEC? NEC of drunkards in power. We cannot allow that. We are not excited by anything. Why should we be excited by the fact that the ANC is now joining us? We've been making this call for quite some time now. So why? The ANC is looking up to us. That's why they are unable to resolve. They were waiting for us to meet like this. Since we have met, the ANC will then follow us. You will see. We are leading the ANC, not the other way around. So whether they meet or they don't meet, we are really not interested. We've got our own mind. We've got our own program. We always articulate our own programs. Motion of no confidence is on the table. Balega must do the right thing. She must bring the motion of no confidence forward. She postponed SONA. The reason why she puts a motion of no confidence on the 22nd, she said, SONA first, the debate of SONA, the budget, then the motion of no confidence. Since there is no SONA, it means the whole logic is affected. Therefore, let the motion come first. Why is SONA postponed? It's postponed because of the issues we are raising in the motion of no confidence. So you have to deal with those issues first, logically, before you can even talk about any other thing. That is the right thing to do, and we think that the judges will be willing to listen to us. Our papers are ready. We are waiting for a letter tomorrow, 10 o'clock. If she's not giving us a positive result, we are lodging immediately 10 o'clock in the Cape High Court.
Thank you very much, Commander-in-Chief. Reverend Mishu, any other hands? Reverend Mishu, any bite?
Yeah. There's a mic here.
No, there's no mic.
Oh, sorry.
Just press it there.
The fact is that we are in a crisis. The country is in a crisis. And as my colleagues have correctly said, the problem is not just Jacob Zuma. All eyes are now on the removal of the president and his deputy taking over. But we are saying as the collective, the problem is not the man only. And the proof is that with all the motions of no confidence, having stated the reasons why we wanted President Zuma to step down, the ANC members of parliament defended him. They protected him, irrespective of the facts that we placed on the table. So we are saying because the problem is not just the president, Jacob Zuma, but is the ANC, it is important that parliament be dissolved and we start from scratch. Because if he is replaced by his deputy, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, the same group of people that were protecting and defending corruption will still be there. And we are still going to continue with the cycle of corruption in the country. We know that there is going to be a heavy price to pay, but we are willing for the sake of the future prosperous South Africa that we change the system right now and that people out there know that we now have credible members of parliament who have the interests of the country at heart and not just a group or a faction within the ruling party. It is something we know that it is going to surprise many to hear that the opposition parties are saying we do not want a deputy president of the country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, to be the president because he was involved in defending Mr. Zuma, who has been charged with a number of corruption issues. Thank you.
Mr. Likota?
Yeah, well, everything has been said, but let me just summarize it. By way of what we have said here, we want South Africa to be returned to the constitutional route that President Mandela, following Kodesa, placed our country on. If the ANC comes back to parliament, we will no longer allow them to act or allow anybody else to act outside the framework of the constitution of our country, and we intend this present parliament to be replaced by men and women who are committed to the letter and spirit of the constitution of our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just make this one point, which is to say, the reason why we've taken Section 50 and not supporting factionalism is because in the long run, what you end up with is entrenched factionalism in every operation of government. So now everybody, it's strange that before all of these corruption issues were taking place, the NPA was not animated, and now a new faction comes in, the NPA is animated. Does that mean if another faction comes in, the NPA must be animated against the other faction? You can see the abuse of state resources on the basis of factions, and Parliament then can end up being captured to the same process where it operates under the leadership of one faction by postponing SONA. The NPA will carry on, then the SIU, then whatever the next process is. When you want to attack corruption, you must say the independence of institutions must remain. Otherwise, if those institutions, starting with Parliament and any other institution of government, cannot be factional, you see it with the public protector, and the list carries on. So what we are saying is that's why we need this fresh start, so that we stop factionalizing institutional democracy. Yes, otherwise, you will end up with a country run by factions rather than in fact being run in a constitutional democracy. That's the point.
Mr. Mulder?
I know we want to conclude. Now, the point is just this. The NEC cannot remove President Zuma. They can't do that. Either President Zuma resigns voluntarily himself, or Parliament must do that. And if Parliament must do that, it's either in terms of Section 102, the motion of no confidence, or the impeachment procedure of 89. So Parliament will have to play a role if Mr. Zuma refuses. And when it comes to Parliament, the opposition currently has the initiative.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I don't see. Oh, there's a hand here.
Yeah, there's a hand. Can
Yeah.
I just ask my question? Because I think it's important. I just need the clarity.
So Section 51 of the Constitution says the President must dissolve the National Assembly if the Assembly has adopted a resolution to dissolve with a supporting vote of the majority of its members and 3 years have passed.
Yes.
If the motion of no confidence against President Jacob Zuma succeeds, there won't be a president because he has to step down, so does his deputy.
That'll be an acting.
And the Speaker then takes on this caretaking role, and within 30 days you have to elect a new president. So just explain what your thinking is.
May I respond?
Who brings the resolution for the House?
The opposition will bring that resolution immediately before the House, and as you clearly indicated in terms of Section 50, the President has to dissolve the House if the majority agrees to that. One can then argue that there is no President, there is no acting President, there is no Deputy President. But look at Section 91D of the Constitution. There will still be a Speaker in the House, and she will be acting as President, and she will then have to dissolve the House.
There is no vacuum. When the president leaves, there will be something closer to the president. And that thing assumes the powers of the president. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, honorable leaders of our opposition parties, and thank you very much.
All right, those are live proceedings straight from Parliament, where the opposition parties have just briefed the media after their meeting on what to do next surrounding the Zexit talks that seemingly, of course, the ANC is indecisive across. I'm still sitting with political analyst Professor Susan Boysen, as well as Mr. Levi Ndo. A lot coming out of that briefing. What was your interesting points there, Prof?
Well, it was a very powerful briefing, and I think very stark reminders to people generally and to the ANC and the behind closed doors meeting as well, of the impact of this impasse in the ANC on the government and on the country. It is with very good reason that these political opposition parties are arguing that Parliament, government business perhaps is not coming to a standstill, but it is not up and running at a normal pace. And as long as we have the very stark reminder through SONA that is being postponed, we do not know when it is going to be delivered. We will possibly know if there is a decisive NEC outcome today. Yes, then we might possibly know. But even the delivery of the budget is currently endangered, potentially on thin ice.
Yeah.
And so many transitions that have to happen there. And then opposition parties ask for the dissolution of Parliament and arguing exactly for the new momentum, a clean beginning that will be possible after that, obviously working on the assumption that the opposition parties would then be able to form a non-factional, very, very multi-party, but a non-factional sort of alliance government. But I think the bottom line is a very powerful one and says the ANC internal fights are impairing functioning of government. Stop it by dissolving Parliament. Bottom line message.
You know, Levi, I mean, I think we heard this call by the opposition parties just before the National Elective Conference last year, where they were saying if the ANC fails to remove President Jacob Zuma, then, of course, they're going to effect Section 51. But now, what do you read into this? The parties now, the word so far has been, let President Jacob Zuma resign and we'll be fine. But now the opposition parties, almost in unison, are saying, no. It's President Zuma is not the problem. Ramaphosa is not the problem. In fact, the ANC is the problem. They must now vacate office. So what kind of message is that now sending to those people that were almost in line to say, okay, maybe we should remove the president as the ANC and continue with business in Parliament?
I think firstly we need to go back at what happened 2 weeks ago. The postponement of SONA was also influenced by the opposition parties.
True.
The opposition parties went to the speaker to say, let's postpone SONA. And I think another area that we need to look at as well is, I think the patience that the ANC had in terms of dealing with President Zuma, in a way has brought an element of uncertainty to everybody. But now that the meeting has, you remember the ANC said they were going to meet over next weekend.
Yeah.
Now that they've brought the meeting closer, then I think the opposition decided to say, let's change the gear and let's come up with something new. Because the opposition has tried on numerous occasions to remove President Zuma from office.
Yeah.
And now that there is a view that is coming from the ANC to remove President Zuma, the opposition is no longer talking about the removal of President Zuma. They're talking about the dissolution of parliament.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at all these issues, but also looking at what then do ordinary citizens benefit out of this entire exercise. Because the members of parliament, all of them, are there to serve ordinary South Africans.
Yeah.
And political parties should be very, very careful when they decide on certain issues. Because sometimes when you think you actually doing what is right, you might then be disadvantaging yourself. That a lot of people supported the opposition parties in their call to remove President Zuma.
Yeah, that was the mandate.
I don't think their call for the dissolution of parliament might receive the same support. And that is one thing that the opposition has to be very, very careful. But another aspect that we need to look at as well is that we need to look at the degree of preparedness on the part of the opposition. The DA might be ready for elections, maybe in the EFF. Some other parties might not be ready for elections, and they might be addressing the press conference for the last time. So that's one other area that particularly smaller parties must actually look at. And the dissolution of parliament, coming with all the reasons that are being presented, the final question should be, is that in the best interest of South Africa and ordinary citizens? And what then is there for all the political parties, in particular the smaller parties, to benefit? Say if you call elections in the next 3 months, I would put my head on the block. Some political parties might not come back. Another aspect that we need to look at, some of the moves that parties make, they should be careful that when they think they're destroying the ruling party, they might be reviving it, and it might work against them. So that's one other area that I think political parties has to look at as well.
Professor Poison, I mean, maybe just to wrap on that, do you think South Africans will buy now into this new sort of call by the opposition party that no, okay, now the ANC must not just remove President Jacob Zuma, but they must now walk out of parliament, essentially, because that's what the opposition is saying?
In the first place, I think it's a very safe call for opposition parties to make.
Prof?
Safe because they can make a powerful appeal and a very powerful reminder about how ANC actions are impairing government, but at the same time they know the ANC, 62% in parliament, thank you very much, will not support that call to dissolve parliament.
True.
So it won't pass. But it's a tactic from their side to show that they have got a plan for when Zuma goes. So they probably expect Zuma to be going, judged by the school others, because they've been criticized, been pointed out extensively in the last few weeks. They've been so focused on Zuma must go that they haven't got an opposition attack plan individually or collectively for when Zuma goes. And this is how they are stepping up the game, by making these appeals. But I can almost absolutely guarantee we will not see Parliament dissolved, and we will not have an early election. Of course, unless the ANC agrees. But it is important, the other part that they mentioned there, that Julius Malema made that, and showing there that Zuma is only part of the problem and that they have to look beyond that. He was talking about factionalism. Of course, he was also a product of factionalism in the ANC coming. Those are very powerful reminders of how politics and party politics can play out.
All right. Well, thank you so much to my political analyst right here in studio with me in the thick of things. That is Professor Susan Poison and Mr. Levi Ndou. Let's take a quick ad break. We're going to be back with more news in a short while.